Hello, Internet. So, last week, I spoke about, it kind of reaffirmed, the overall mission that I'm behind, helping people figure out the best way that they can find their own independence. And I had this idea. Well, it's not really my idea. I had a thought, really. There's this group that I'm paying to be in, and recently one of the exercises was basically an entire strategy plan for blah 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 blah. But part of that is what's called the Eulerian Destiny. I have no idea how to pronounce it. I keep thinking when I see the word, I think that Euler guy who's a mathematician, but it's not spelled the same, so it's not the same guy. But it's basically a Venn diagram of these four different facets, and where they intersect is like where you're supposed to go, based on your own brain stuff. Wow, I'm getting really technical. Brain stuff. But these four facets for the Eulerian Destiny. I'm tempted to go out of order because one of these is probably not going to be relevant to some people. It'll be relevant, but it'll be less relevant. We'll get to that in a minute. First facet, which I consider to be the most important. What are you curious about? Where does your curiosity lie? What are you fascinated in learning about, in doing, in learning how to do? And to use me as an example, that would be a really long list. But anyway, moving on, staying on focus. What are you curious about? The second facet, what did you grow up around? And again, this is like what are you curious about? What are you focused on? What does your brain want to focus on? And then what were you raised around? That's you have experience with that. Third facet. And this is where I'm going out of order a little bit, because the actual third facet, which I'm putting on the fourth facet, is we'll get to it. Third facet. What do people say about you? What do people say you're good at? What do people say you're not good at? And I want to throw in a little word of caution here. And I'll reference you back to episode 1 of this entire Random Thoughts series, where my biggest mistake was listening to what other people told me that I should do with my life. People are going to do that because that's just people. They see a little bit of information and they think they can figure out and solve the entire puzzle, and that's not always true, because there's oftentimes a lot of information about people that you don't see. But do pay attention when people tell you what you're good at and what you're not good at. Oh, even that, take it with a grain of salt. Because when I was teaching at UNC Charlotte, a lot of people thought I was not good at teaching. Yet, when I talked to just people in regular, everyday life, oh, you should be a teacher. You're so good at teaching. Which do you believe? Well, considering that most of the college students that were in my biology lab were probably rich people, well, the children of rich people who were there on their parents' money and just taking courses because the system requires them to and just didn't really care about it. I'm going to think that their opinion that I couldn't teach is just, they didn't want to learn. And really, I've come to the conclusion that nobody can actually teach anybody. Because if somebody doesn't want to learn, then nobody can teach them. But if somebody does want to learn, they don't need a teacher. I mean, okay, a teacher helps. But if you really want to learn it badly enough, you'll just learn it. Anyway, summarizing because I went off on a tangent, what are you curious about? What were you raised around? What do people say about you? What you're good at and what you're not good at. The fourth facet, and this is the one where a lot of people are going to be like, facet number 4. What have you been doing the last 10 years? And the younger people in the audience are probably like, well, that's the exact same answer as what was I raised around? So the older people in the audience, they've obviously been doing something for the last 10 years that's not what they were raised around. And if you're young enough that what you were doing the last 10 years is actually the same as what you were raised around, my best advice that I can give you, in my opinion, is you get some experience. Just go back to what you're curious about. Experiment. You pick one thing that you're curious about and start learning. Start practicing it. Learn more about it, and pay attention. Because if you start not liking it, okay, move on. Go back to what you're curious about. I mean, first of all, actually, before you switch, why were you curious about that thing? And why did you decide you didn't like it? Because here's an example from my life that, I started to talk about earlier on, but now let's wait. Since the age of 5, fascinated with science. I mean, I was reading books about astronomy and astronauts and biology and medical books since the age of 5. And people are like, oh, you love science. You're good at science. You should be a scientist. You should do research. And there's a hair on my camera, and it's annoying me. There. Okay, there we got it. So, went to college, studying to go into research, biology. And that's why I did some teaching, because that was required that was one of the many hoops that you had to jump through to get a degree in that place. Which, that was fun. And, pretty much all the classes that I took were fun. There was one, I won't get into that. But here's the thing. When you, the actual process of doing research, and this actually gets into kind of how INTJs are special. I love learning new things. I love the systems aspect of science. And being presented with a puzzle and then figuring out the answer and then getting that adrenaline rush from getting the answer, that was fun. But here's the thing, most of the jobs out in research, you're not that guy. You're the guy who goes into the lab and runs the experiment over and over and over and over and over, and writes down the numbers, and plots the graphs. If you know anything about INTJs, that's no, I'm not doing that. Unfortunately, I've been so brainwashed by people telling me my entire life, you should do research, you should be a scientist. Anyway. So a few years later, I did the analysis of why do I love this thing? Why am I curious about it? And why did I decide I don't like it? It's not the science that I don't like. I love science. I still love science. I can't get enough of it. But it's just... Here's a video game example. I don't like action games, especially fighting action games, where you fight the same enemies over and over and over again, noticing a pattern. Throw me a challenge. Some new enemy that has you have to figure out the tactics. That's fun. But as soon as I figure out the tactics to beat this thing quickly and efficiently, I want a new challenge. And if the game forces me to fight the same enemy over and over and over again, it's just a chore. I like the challenge of figuring out a puzzle. But having to execute the tactics repeatedly is a chore. We go from curiosity and experimenting and not liking something to kind of distilling it down into the why. Why do I like it and why do I hate it? So again, to wrap up, the 4 facets. What are you curious about? What were you raised around? What do other people say about you? Particularly, what are you good at and what are you not good at? When they tell you what you should do with your life, don't be rude. I know an ITJ saying don't be rude. Anyway, and number 4, I had a brain fart. What have you been doing the last 10 years? That's number 4. Embarrassing, but I don't edit. Sometimes I edit, but I don't think I need to edit that one out. So those are the 4 facets of the Eulerian Destiny. And again, if you don't have 10 years, the past 10 years of experience, start working on that. Start delving into what you're curious about, and start figuring out where all 4 of these things kind of intersect. And again, this is not going to tell you exactly what you should do. It's going to help you develop a greater sense of self-awareness, like why I love science, but why I hate research. That sort of thing. And why I love video games, but why I hate certain video games. And why I love filmmaking, but why I hate editing. Again, notice a pattern? Anyways, I'm losing my light. And I've delivered the point. At this point, I'm just elaborating on that. But again, 4 facets, find out where they intersect, develop that extra layer of self-awareness, and don't be afraid to experiment. And let's disclaimer: experimenting with career options and life directions. Let's not take this a little too literally. But yeah, and by the way, the cord. You've probably been seeing that the entire video, but it's there. It's growing. Anyway, see you next week with more of this stuff.